This is Julianne Condia, host of Rewritten. Thank you so much for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
You're listening to Catch Up, an official news production of Public House Media.
Today is July 27, 2020, and it's time to catch up on the news that you need to know about.
Today, we're helping you catch up on Yoho resigns from Board of Christian Organization.
Hurricane Hanna hits southern Texas, where cases are surging.
Peter Green of Fleetwood Mac dies at age 73.
And as always, ending with a little bit of good news for you today.
We're your hosts, Anna Herman
and Catherine Smith. Welcome to Catch Up.
Florida GOP Rep Yoho has resigned from the board of a Christian organization that works to fight hunger following his tense exchange with Democratic Rep Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York. The Florida congressman resigned on Friday during a meeting with the organization board, according to a recent statement made by Bread for the World.
The organization wrote in a statement, quote, "We believe that Rep. Ted Yoho's recent actions and words as reported in the media are not reflective of the ethical standards expected of our members of our board of directors. Bread sought his resignation as an action that reaffirms our commitment to coming alongside women and people of color nationally and globally as they continue to lead us to a more racially inclusive and equitable world."
This resignation comes after a recent report of Yoho's statement calling Ocasio-Cortez derogatory explicit names after a heated meeting and argument outside of the Capitol walls. According to a reporter from The Hill who overheard these defaming remarks, Yoho came up to Ocasio-Cortez outside of the House steps on Monday and sparked a conversation about her position on unemployment and crime in New York City.
In addition to the heated remarks, Yoho was said to have made the statement that she was, quote, disgusting and, quote, out of her mind. Yoho later apologized to the House floor to Ocasio-Cortez for the, quote, abrupt manner of the conversation, end quote, he had with her, but denied, but using any vulgar terminology to describe her. Day after roaring ashore, Hurricane Hanna lashed the Texas Gulf Coast on Sunday with high winds and drenching rains that destroyed boats, flooded streets, and knocked out power across a region already reeling from a surge in coronavirus cases. Downgraded to a tropical storm, Hanna hovered over the U.S.-Mexico border with winds nearing 50 miles an hour, the National Hurricane said. Here to talk more on the topic is official catch-up correspondent Bryce Burge. Thanks for joining us today, Bryce.
Thanks for having me.
So can you tell us what's going on here and what kind of damage Hurricane Hanna is producing?
Well, it's honestly, it's your basic hurricane and tropical storm, tropical depression style high winds, dealing with rainfall, flash flooding in some areas. But as the water rises, we're starting to see a little bit more about just the infrastructure damage that's really starting to kind of peak up, especially in places like Corpus Christi, where 3 years ago they were hit by Harvey pretty bad, and they're still trying to rebuild new. And so now as that kind of comes up, that impacts your roads, it impacts your tree development, it impacts your agricultural aspects of doing things to try to stop damage from hurricane-like events, which is what Hanna is. And now those things are starting to reduce some of the impacts compared to Harvey, but at the exact same time, there's going to be a lot of water and a lot of water damage that's going to be in the area.
So, Bryce, with Hurricane Hanna hitting an area where COVID cases are surging, what kind of challenges and problems does the community face when it comes to the virus and dealing with that in Hurricane Hanna?
Well, there's two aspects of that makes that really difficult. One is the virus itself, and that Texas has really kind of become a hot spot in terms of COVID-19 positive cases. It's one of the largest hotspots in the country, with some towns not in the hurricane area being forced to kind of start picking who stays in the ICU and who has to risk it in other aspects of the hospital, which is what we saw right when this was first starting in New York City. So that's a difficult aspect. And then the second difficult aspect of it is the response. When you deal with FEMA-like situations, when you deal with emergencies like this, you're all bringing people into a coordinated area, a church, a high school, something like that, where you're bringing in a ton of people to be in close proximity with each other, because that is the most common sense way of dealing with getting resources to people that now all of a sudden have no infrastructure or resources for themselves, very little resources for themselves. So now that this has kind of come together, you have to try to figure out how to put social distancing guidelines, how do you put in aspects of PPE and other kind of protection equipment to make sure that you're okay being this close to each other when all of a sudden your lack of fresh water, your lack of clean water goes out the window and you're stuck being right next to each other. We don't have a plan for this kind of stuff when dealing with things usually, but I guess I would kind of compare it to what happens when you got a fire in one wing of the building and tornadoes outside. You know what, you're kind of left to pick which one you're dealing with at the time, and it makes it a little bit more dangerous for everybody dealing with both at the same time.
This definitely is a story that is affecting many communities. So thank you for catching up with us today and Catch Up Today, Bryce.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Now, I'm a big fan of Fleetwood Mac, so this story does hit a little close to home. Peter Green, the blues guitarist who led the first incarnation of Fleetwood Mac in a career shortened by psychedelic drugs and mental illness, has died at age 73 on Saturday. Green, to some listeners, was the best of the British blues guitarists of the 1960s, and B.B. King once said that Green, quote, has the sweetest tone I have ever heard. He was the only one who gave me the cold sweats, end quote. Green also made a mark as a composer with Albatross and as a songwriter with Oh Well and Black Magic Woman.
He crashed out of the band in 1971. Even so, Mick Fleetwood said in an interview with the Associated Press in 2017 that Green deserves the lion's share of the credit for the band's success. Peter was asked why he was called the band Fleetwood Mac. He said, quote, well, I thought maybe I'd move on at some point, and I wanted Mick and John McVie to have a band. End of story, explaining how generous he was, end quote, said Fleetwood, who describes Green as a standout in an era of great guitar work.
Fleetwood Mac made its debut at the British Blues and Jazz Festival in the summer of 1967, which led to a recording contract, then a first album in February of 1968. The album, which included Long Grey Mare and 3 other songs by Green, stayed on the British charts for 13 months.
Well, in the midst of today's chaos in the world that we're currently living in, what do we have for some good news today, Anna?
Well, a Florida news reporter will forever be thankful to his total stranger who went out of her way to send a thoughtful yet concerning email. In the email itself, the television viewer encouraged the news reporter to see a doctor, of which journalist Victoria Price surely did.
And she was sure glad that she did. The 28-year-old WFLA TV reporter received the email report with a statement of concern to the lump on the young reporter's neck. The email stated, quote, "Hi, I just saw your news report. What concerns me is a lump on your neck. Please have your thyroid checked," end quote. It read, "Reminds me of my neck. Mine turned out to be cancer. Take care of yourself," end quote.
Price found that her lump was indeed thyroid cancer and had to undergo surgery on the following Monday to remove the tumor, thyroid, and a couple of nearby lymph nodes. Well, thanks for catching up on today's news with us. I'm Anna Herman.
And I'm Catherine Splith. Please make sure to catch up with us again tomorrow.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts.
We appreciate you listening to Catch Up. For even more content, follow Catch Up Digital on social media. Just search for @TimeForCatchUp.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on any of the stories we covered today. Just use the hashtag #PassTheCatchup on social media.
Catch Up is an official news production of Public House Media.